Lovely. Good morning, everybody. Great to be with you here today. My name's Charlie Lawson. I call myself a very unnatural networker, and perhaps I'll better explain that a little bit more by just kicking off into the presentation. I'm here to help you with networking and referrals. That's what I do. I help people get referrals. So many people love referrals. Show of hands, who likes referrals? We all do, yeah? But most of us kind of wait until they drop in our lap, and that's not a strategy. That's or certainly not a proactive one. It's a reactive one when situations happen. So that's what I'm here to do. Talk about how to generate referrals proactively from your networking. Let me just share my screen, and I've got some slides to go along with this, and I want to make this interactive as well. I want to make sure you're staying awake and with me. But before we get into it, let's talk. I mean, effectively, what we're doing when it comes to getting referrals and growing our business through networking is promoting ourselves. And sometimes things don't go quite as planned. A quick story for you. This is going back in time, maybe sort of late teenage years. And when I was a student, I used to work with a bunch of friends on a summer camp for kids. So, as parents, you want to get rid of the kids during the summer holidays because work, life goes on. So this was a camp that you'd send kids to on a week for a week, not a residential one, just in the day. And they do various activities, kayaking, archery, running around the woods, all sorts of things like that. Get them out the outdoors. Anyway, one day there was much excitement in the camp because the local newspaper was sending down a journalist and a photographer, and there was big excitement. This was a good promotional opportunity for the camp. And that day I happened to be with a group of 7 and 8 year olds, and they were doing face painting. Now the photographer thought that me doing face painting, and I have about as much artistic talent as well, I have none at all, let's put it that way. Me doing face painting would be a good way to take a picture and set off this article. Now, in my group that week was a little boy, 8-year-old, and he was a football fan. And his favourite team, no judgment here, was Arsenal. And he was desperate for me to write his team, make it prominent that he supported Arsenal. So he asked me to write Arsenal across his forehead. And what do you think the snapper did as the photographer, as he took the picture? He took it just after I'd written the 4th letter, which meant me being called into the boss's office the next day to try and explain why I'd written arse on a kid's forehead. Not the kind of promotion they were looking for. But anyway, we're here to promote ourselves a bit better. And let me see if I can help that by looking at how we've got 4 steps to referrals. And that's what I'm going to take you through today. Let's just talk about referrals as a concept for a minute, because as we said before, everyone loves referrals. We all like them. We all want them. We often just have to wait until they come into drop into our lap. But let's just look at some stats on referrals. Referrals are easier from a conversion point of view. More people will buy when the opportunity comes through to them from a referral. 4 times more likely to buy. They'll often help with lifetime value of clients as well. You see a 16% higher lifetime value because, again, why do people stay with you as a service provider? They stay as the client because it's come from a basis of trust. And when that referral in the first place, well done, puts people together, you'll see a higher lifetime value. But I think most, importantly of all, is when we look at how we I'm talking about the general public here, we as the public think about our buying habits. 84% of us start the buying process with a referral. Now, I know we can Google it, of course, but so often what do we do when we are Googling it? We're looking for recommendations within Google. So the referrals are just a very powerful way to grow your business. And as we've said, we all want them. It's just a case of how we can get more of them. So, quick question for you, and I'm going to get you to interact if I can, maybe with using the chat. So, have your chat ready, just for simple answers. Question for you is, I'll tell you what. I'll come to the question in a sec. Let's just take you through my this 4-step process to getting referrals first. Okay. It's an acronym. Let's just run through it quickly with you. S stands for stuff. I'll explain these in a lot more detail later, and you might think, well, what's stuff? That's just very random, but you'll see what I mean when we get into it. T stands for targets, E stands for getting engagement, and P stands for patience. You need these 4 things to get referrals into your business, or more referrals into your business. So let's dig into it by talking about stuff. And maybe that's a slightly cryptic one. So let's try and understand. And now's the time for that question. Forgive me, I got my mind in the wrong order there. Question: is it what you know or who you know? Kind of obvious, isn't it? Feel free to answer in the chat. Dave says both. Oh, that's just sitting on the fence, but we'll go with that. See, in effect, really, this is one of those sort of rhetorical questions, and actually, it's kind of obvious. It's obvious that who you know is the answer, but in fact, whether you've written who or both, that's both wrong, because it's how well you know them. That's what counts when it comes to getting referrals. How well you know people. Clearly, it's who over what. We know that, but it's how well you know people that make the difference. Let me share a quick story. This is a guy who I know through networking. I wouldn't say I'm really close to him. We've done bits of business here and there. We know each other well. Name's Tony. Runs a printing business, and he's done well. And I've heard over many times, I've heard him say that he particularly wanted to get into a company local to me. In fact, it was on the business park where the office is. And I'd heard him say this many times, and we'll talk about being targeted in a minute in terms of how that can be a good thing for your business. But I'd heard him say this so many times, and because, as I say, the company premises that he wanted to get into was on the business park where my office was, I would see them pretty much every day, either driving in or walking to grab a coffee or whatever. I'd walk past their premises and I'd see the sign on the door and I'd think, oh, Tony wants to get into them, and he wants that stuff. I didn't know anyone there. I couldn't do anything about it. Anyway, one day, Tony and I sat down for a conversation. We had a one-to-one over a coffee, turned into a couple more drinks, and the way sometimes conversations go. And we got into a very big discussion. Now, I'm going to call it for what it was. It was an argument about whether Lewis Hamilton is the greatest Formula One driver of all time. Now, you'll be thinking one of maybe 3 things at this point. One, yes, of course, he is the greatest Formula One driver of all time. Don't be ridiculous. Why would you think anything else? That's one thing you might be thinking. 2, you might be thinking, what are you talking about? Insert name of other driver is the best Formula One driver of all time. Or 3, you're thinking, I don't really care. Don't they just drive around in circles? Whichever your opinion, whatever your viewpoint, it's what happened next that really makes this interesting. Because when I was walking through the business park the next time to go and grab my coffee, I walked past the premises of this company. And instead of just thinking, oh, Tony wants to get into them, not sure I can help, I walked in and there was a guy on the reception desk, and I said, look, you don't know me at all. I'm just working in the office up the road, but someone I know really wants to speak to the facilities manager here. Could I get an introduction for him? Now, I couldn't believe how easy it was to get that introduction. It was just like they said, yeah, no problem. Here's the detail. And he arranged an intro. Now, that's a bigger story for another day. Cold calling. I mean, most people don't like cold calling. Who likes cold calling? Do you like cold calling? Probably not. But when you do cold calling on behalf of someone else, it's a very different story. I couldn't believe, honestly, how easy it was to get that referral. But it's really what made the difference. Why had that conversation where we were discussing, honestly, nothing about business? We were chatting about a shared passion of Formula One in this case, that made the difference. And the answer is, it's because I got to know stuff about Tony. And this is what my message to you in terms of your referrals are. We've got to get to know people really well. It's not about a high level, small talk interactions that are typical when you go networking. That's not good enough. It's not good enough to just have those kind of. You've got to get to know people, really know people. And when you get to know stuff about them, or you find common ground between you, or you find ways in which you can interact and get along and bond, then you're going to be more prepared to do something for them. You're going to be able to walk into a building and make a cold call for them, honestly. So that's that's what stuff means. It means that we get to know really what drives people, makes a difference. And it's a great networking question as well. I often do this. I call myself an unnatural networker. If I can avoid going networking, I genuinely do it. I'd far rather hang out with my mates. It's much easier, and I don't have to have that awkward small talk thing going on. So if you want to avoid that, what can you do? Don't talk about all the time. Don't talk all about the time about business. Talk about common interests. When you find common ground between you, you'll build that relationship. It makes for a better conversation, if nothing else. So yeah, don't underestimate the power of not talking about business and actually just getting along with people as people. Does that make sense? Are we with it? Are we alive? There's a few people without their cameras on, so I've no idea. You might be just having a nice kip or checking your emails. That's up to you. Please. Oh, Larissa, you've given me a little thumbs up and a party celebration. Excellent. Good to know you're with us. Cool. So that's the first step. We get to know stuff about people. See what I mean by stuff there? That may have been a little weird when you first saw it. Let's move on to the next one. Let's talk about targets. Because targets make a big difference when it comes to networking, and I mean really being really targeted. I mean going for that specific person. Let me tell you a quick story to see if I can illustrate this. I was doing a session with a group of business owners, all small business owners, about 50 people in the room, and we were going around the room, and literally every single person said, "I'd like to get an introduction to," and they had to name a person. Couldn't just say anyone who wants, my service, or anyone who needs whatever I happen to be offering. They had to name a person, or at the very least, a company that they wanted to get into. And as we're going around the room, when you're at the front, of the room, you can kind of read people's body language. And there was a guy at the back, far right corner of the room, and I could tell his body language. What he was saying, I'm not buying into this process. He was kind of sat back, sort of very relaxed, bit of a face on, and he wasn't paying attention or wasn't engaging the process at all, I should say. And you kind of had it in my mind, and you could see as I was going around, I could see this is going to be a challenge here. This when we come to him, I don't know what's going to happen. Anyway, some great connections were being made. It's just the way it works. It's counterintuitive, and you might think, well, why would I want to cut out 99.9% of the world over there just to go for that just individual over here? But it really genuinely works, and we saw some great opportunities come back. It doesn't necessarily mean you're going to get the exact person, but someone people know works with someone in that company, or a friend used to work there, or I don't know that company, but I know this company. And people work it out and create opportunities for each other. Anyway, it came to this guy, sat at the back of the room, really not engaged, and he said, no, move on. And he literally just swiped his hand, move on. I was like, go on, give it a go. Just try. You've heard some great opportunities here. Just give it a go. And he said, look, if you're telling me this group of small business owners are going to get me an introduction to the marketing manager of the Hilton Hotel Group, I don't believe it. Everyone fell silent, waiting to see what I'd do next. But I didn't do anything, because the guy 2 seats along from him, literally 2 seats, stood up and said, what? My next door neighbor, who I'm really quite good mates with, our kids go to the same school. We play golf regularly. We're playing golf this weekend, in fact. He's the chairman of the Hilton Hotel Group. I could make an introduction for you, but I'm not sure I'm going to, because you don't seem to have the right attitude about it. I didn't have to say anything else. The point had been made. It's just that random connection, that random nature of networking that makes being specific work. Okay. And as I say, it is counterintuitive. And you might think, well, why would you cut out everyone to go for that one person? It just works. And it's the random nature of how networking happens that makes the difference. We haven't got time in this presentation to do it. You can do more exercises on this to show you how this can work, and we could actually demonstrate it. We haven't got time to do that here and now. So I'll give you one bit of advice to take away from this. Just show me, and perhaps unmute if you want to just jump in here. Be good just to interact a little bit. Do you find it difficult? If I was to say to you, who's a good client for you, would you be able to name a person, or at the very least a company? Give me a show of hands, or shake your heads, or just wave at me and just tell me where you're at with that. Henry, you could you?
Yeah.
Cool. Any others? Not yet. Lots of people not really coming forward on this one, and it doesn't surprise me. That's typical. Here's the suggestion then to help with this. If you can't think of a good, a target, someone you can name, here's what you do. You think of a good current client. Can you all picture a good current client? Maybe your best current client. Sure you can. They're your clients. It's easy. You can do that, right? And then you think, well, would someone else or another company a bit like them be good as well? Now, I appreciate from time to time there may be reasons, and it's inappropriate or against the terms of your contract to go and work with a competitor. I get that could happen, but in the majority of cases it won't. So just picture a good current client. Let's take Hilton Hotels. Hilton Hotels a good client. Well, would Marriott Hotels be a good target? Probably yes. Okay, so always think of a good current client and see where that takes you. And then really go through it and think, who do you need to speak to? What job title is it? You may need to do a bit of research here. Where do you do that research? It's an interesting place called the internet. I'm sure you've heard of it. I'm being facetious, obviously. Google, LinkedIn are the two places where you'll find the details you need to get into. Perhaps if there's any questions of that, we can come back and go into a bit more detail, because we're doing the overview if you like here. But yeah. The more specific you are and the more targeted you are, and especially when you're working with, go back to that story with Tony with the printing company the printer, he wanted to get into the company on the business part. If he hadn't told me that he wanted to get into that company, I wouldn't have been able to help him. Effectively, by being specific, you're giving your network the tools they need to help you. Like we said before, we don't want referrals just to be occasionally dropping into our lap if we're lucky. We want to be proactive about it. So my advice to any business owner is to have a top 10 target list, honestly. And that's constantly being reviewed and updated as you manage to get to speak to people. And sometimes, obviously, you're not going to get to work with the targets you've got. Clearly, that's going to happen. But continually review that, continually carry that list around with you effectively. So when one of your contacts, one of your network, someone you know well, could be one of your friends, doesn't matter who it is, someone you know well says, how can I help? Well, I really want to speak to this company. You can't give me an intro, can you? And then you've given them the tools to help you. All right, we're happy. We've done two of our step process, the stuff and the targets. Let's talk about engagement. And you've probably noticed a theme here. I like stories. So let me tell you another little story to set this one off. I want to tell you a story about a lady called Maria. Maria is a travel agent, and I heard this story. She recounted it to me in a one-to-one we had one time, and she said she was sat in her office at about 5:45 on a Friday afternoon. Now, what are we doing at 5:45 on a Friday afternoon? Are we proactively moving the business forward and thinking, right, what am I going to do? Are we, no, of course we're not. It's 5:45 on a Friday afternoon. We're thinking about the evening. She was thinking about hearing. She had some friends coming over, and it was that classic Friday afternoon, the evening decision. Is it a curry or is it a Chinese? Honestly, that's where her mind was at. Anyway, in that position, the phone rang. She picked up the phone, and there's a lady on the other end of the line who's very obviously upset. She's crying. She said, well, what's going on? How can I help? And it turned out this lady was due to get married the next day and then fly off on her honeymoon on the Sunday. The problem was, and the reason she was upset, not because she was getting married, she was very happy about that bit, it was the honeymoon. There were no flights. They were due to go to the Caribbean. There was a strike. There were no flights to the Caribbean. That was it. No honeymoon. It wasn't happening. And she said, look, I know it's last minute. I get that. is there anything you can do? She was desperate. Maria asked one question. She said, where will you be tomorrow morning? And she said, I'm going to be getting ready for the wedding. It was at her mum's house. Told her where it was. Maria said, look, I don't want to promise, but let me see what I can do. She put the phone down. She picked it up again, made a couple of calls, got online, and she managed to source a very similar holiday package. So same dates, same standard of accommodation, same, even down to a couple of trips and excursions that they'd planned, so sort of things that they were going to do. It was just, instead of going to the Caribbean, it was to Hawaii. 3 weeks later, Maria sat in her office on another day, and a postcard drops through the letterbox. On the card is this picture of an idyllic beachside Hawaiian beachside scene. On the back are a few short words. We don't know what we'd have done without you. End of story. Tell me, and I'd like you to interact on this one. Let's go with the chat. Tell me, well, in fact, before we do the chat, show of hands, would you refer business to Maria? You would, right? Yeah. Why? Tell me why Maria was good. Why was the travel agent so good? And do that in the chat. Give me your reasons why you might refer business to Maria, or give us one reason each. Henry, thank you. Showed effort. Absolutely, no doubt about that. Dave went above and beyond, no question. Gone above and beyond. It's going to be probably a thing. Cared, took responsibility, listened, helped solve a problem, demonstrated empathy. All of these are true. Any more to come? I don't know if people are still typing. I don't want to. Empathy and competence. Thank you, Larissa. Yes. I'll give it 5 seconds more. I think we can see the kind of picture that we've got there. But here's the thing. I don't think all of those are true. Don't get me wrong. But I don't think any of those are the reasons why you'd refer business to Marie. You know what the answer is? Because I told you a story. It's the story that grabbed you. It's the story that made you think, wow, she cares. It's the story that got you probably thinking more than anything, this poor lady, did she get to go on a honeymoon? I mean, that's at the root of it. That we're human beings. When we hear a human situation, some sort of problem, we just want to know, how did it work out? What happened? Did she get to go on a honeymoon? That's the key with stories. And so often, and look, I'll ask the question, show of hands again, you can demonstrate this. Have you ever been in a networking situation, either a bigger event or you're having a coffee with someone and they're talking about their business, and let's be honest about it, it's really tedious. You're not keeping up with them. They're just going on. They're maybe hard selling to you. Maybe, we've all experienced that, right? That's not a great way to network. A much better way to network is to demonstrate your credibility by telling stories. So what are you got to do when you network? You've got to tell stories. Who are you going to tell stories about? Well, you're going to tell stories about your clients. And I just thought I'd give a few little pointers on how to do it. Who thinks they're really good at telling stories? Again, show of hands. Tom does. Dave's a bit unsure. A few people not really sure. I'm not seeing an overwhelming yes, I'm good at telling stories. Not many of you are. Martin, not me. You're terrible at it. I'm sure you're not, Martin. We can maybe give you a couple of pointers as well. So what I thought I'd do, give you a couple of pointers. And for me, it's a bit like, if you're making a recipe, you follow a list. You've got your ingredients. So let's go through them now. Our first ingredient is it's got to be a problem. I want to just make a note of these as we go through them. There's got to be a problem. There's got to be a situation. There's got to be a challenge of some kind. If you think to the last, Hollywood film you saw, the last book you read, did it all start off very nice over here, and then it went along a bit, and it was all very nice in the middle, and then it all went along a bit, and it was all very nice at the end? No, because that would be tedious. No one would read that. No one would watch that film. It may have started very nice, but then the world was about to explode, or someone was dying, or whatever's going on. And then there's the peaks and the troughs and the ups and the downs and the struggle and the trying to get through before it reaches its climactic conclusion and settles into its new normal. You've got to have a problem. You've got to have an issue. There's not a story if you haven't got a problem. What else do you need? You need a solution. Now, the solution may not always be a good solution. It may just be a compromise and we just have to live with that, honestly. But we hope to have some sort of, it's got to resolve, and hopefully it resolves in a nice way and where everyone's happy at the end. But yeah, problem and solution obviously go hand in hand. We also need some structure. We've got to take our listeners along with us as we go through it. And if it jumps around or doesn't make sense, whether that's chronological or whether it's, you know, the key elements of the story, it needs to have some story. I'll tell a bit more about that in a bit. I think there's a bit more to say. Let me carry on with the ingredients first, and I'll come back to that. You definitely need some emotion. If you can get some emotion, I think you can grab people's attention better. You know, it's like we said, we put ourselves in the shoes of the person, and we just want to know the answer, and that gets people listening to your stories better. And bear in mind, incidentally, this is a story where you're demonstrating your credibility with one of your clients. That's the kind of story that this is, and that's relevant when we talk about the next ingredient. We need some characters. What characters do you have? Maybe just unmute and shout out. What characters do you need in a story?
Antagonist and protagonist.
Antagonist and protagonist. You've got the lingo down there. Definitely, Tom. Yeah, definitely. I call them the hero and the villain. I'll probably go with that for just simplicity's sake. Who's the hero? Well, in this case, it's you. You're the one who's going to come in and show how amazing you are. The villain. I mean, we're not necessarily we're not talking about a James Bond style villain who's plotting to blow up the world. It might be a metaphorical villain. You know, in this story with Maria and the travel agent, you know, the villain was the fact that there was this strike, and you know that was causing the issue. So it's not always an actual person necessarily, but it's creating a scenario. There's one other character type you probably need. You'll need the sort of person who's suffering the consequences of this problem. The damsel or the person in distress. Let's put it that way. So you need that person as well. Now, there's one other ingredient I think you need. It might seem minor, but details. Come into the chat for a sec. What time did the phone call come in to Maria's office? You can even put what day if you like. What time was it? Couple slightly out, but pretty much we're there. 5:45 on a Friday. Now, that may have seemed like an unnecessary detail, but it provided such context. That little detail provides context. And like I said, it helps us put ourselves in the shoes of the people involved. And it makes a big difference when it comes to telling story. Now, you can't lace your story with so many details, it just becomes waffle and you know, too much to comprehend. But just a couple of details here and there will make a massive difference to how you tell your story. Now, the way with you know, if you're baking a cake, you have your ingredients list. You need all those ingredients in, and with a story, it's the same deal. You need to have all those ingredients in. But if you can only have one of them, or if there was one that was more important, perhaps in the chat, just tell me which one you think. You've got to just have one. You've got to pick one that's the most important. Which one are you picking? Each of you just type one of those words into the chat. Tom thinks emotion. Lots of emotion. Henry thinks characters, though. Damien, characters. Any others? Structure. Okay, so we've got a bit of a broad spectrum there. For me, I think I'm with the majority of you. If there was only one you could have, it would be the emotion. And the emotion's so important to a story because it's what gets us listening. And sometimes this causes challenge. I was doing this exercise, a deeper version of this exercise, with a group of business owners one time. And there was a lady in the front row, and I could see she was really troubled when I said this. She was really worried. The facial expression said, "I don't know how to do this." And I said, I picked up on it and said, what's going on? What was the problem? And she said, look, I get it. We're supposed to be emotional. And we'd heard a story that day where someone's business, they literally saved someone's life in the course of their business. So it was definitely an emotional story. And she said, I get it. You're supposed to be emotional. I see how that works. But I run a payroll company. What's emotional about payroll? And everyone fell about laughing. But I just asked her, tell us about a recent client. This it was around January, February time, and she told me about a recent client at that point who, so in this payroll, she was doing payroll for a small business, 6 staff. So there was her, the company, the client, and the bank. And between her and the company, everything had gone right. It was the bank, something had messed up at the bank. I don't know what had happened. But the staff hadn't been paid on the 23rd of December, just before Christmas. Immediately, you can see where the emotion might drive her. What she did was she actually drew money out of her own account, paid the staff herself, and settled it with the bank after the Christmas and New Year period, which actually shows how credible she could be, in terms of referring her as a payroll company. So there's always emotion to be found. Sometimes you need to dig deep, and sometimes you just need to make sure you're structuring your story correctly. Now, I said I'd come back to the structure to go in a bit more detail, and I think this will show you how you can make emotion really work. So I'm going to say that there are 3 parts, 3 bits of structure you need. You need the setup. You need to, lay out the situation. What's the problem? Who the characters are? What's the, give it some context so we know where we are. You've then come in this style of story with what you did. You're the hero. You swoop in and save the day. You sorted it all out. So there's what you did. And then the afters. Now, that's not my word. A guy called Andy Bounds. If you ever get a chance to see Andy Bounds, I don't know if 1 or 2 of you nodding there, he's really good sales and communication guy, very, very good. But he talks about the afters. And what that means is you don't actually buy most products. You buy what those products give you. So as an example, you don't buy a light bulb per se, you buy light. You don't buy a pair of glasses, you buy the ability to see. So it's what the product gives you that really counts. It's the afters that come after you're done. Now, you've got those 3 sections. You definitely need to incorporate all of those in some way, shape, or form. The key thing for me is how much weighting you give each of those sections. Okay, so just for a moment, give you 30 seconds to do this. I'd like you to think in percentage terms, what percentage weighting, what importance are you going to give to the setup? What percentage weighting are you going to give to what you did? And what percentage weighting are you going to give to the afters? Okay, so 30 seconds, I say 3 percentages, just as a hint, they have to add up to 100. You know that. What percentage are you going to give? As I say, I'll give you a few seconds, and yeah, stick it in the chat. Thank you, Henry. You've already done so. Appreciate that. What percentage are you going to go with? Okay, few answers there. I won't go through everyone, but because I think there's themes here. So we'll start with Henry as you went first. 40, 20, 40. So equal weighting on setup and afters, but less on what you did. Damien, much more weighting on the setup. You're really nailing the situation. Very little on the afters. Tom, complete opposite to Henry. You've gone not very much on the setup and the afters, but focusing on what you did. They want to go to Pareto, but 20, 30, 50. I can see where you're going with that. So more on the off. So effectively, what we're seeing there is a complete mishmash. There are some people who think setup's most important. Some people think what you did is most important. Some people think what the afters are most important. Shall I tell you what I think is most important? I hope you say yes to that, because that's kind of what's coming next. And I'm very precise with this. I like precision when I do my percentages. So let's go through the setup. 47.5%. Like I said, precision is key here. 47.5%. I'll come back to what you did in a moment, because I want to give you the afters. And I go with 47.5% there. Yes, that's right, maths fans. It's only 5% on what you did. So a couple of you, Henry, definitely did this. Martin, no, you're slightly different. I thought it was another one. Sorry, Henry. The point, I think we're saying the same thing. It's what you did is less important. Okay, and let me just drive this point home for a sec. Right. Well, in fact, can I say something controversial? I kind of want you to nod your head to this, because I'm going to say something controversial. Listen in. What you do is really boring. I'll say it again in case you missed it. What you do is really boring. Now I get it. What you do is your life's work. It's your business. It's you love it. Clearly, it's not boring. You get what I'm saying? But from a storytelling point of view, it is. We don't care. We literally do not care how you do what you do. What you did is kind of irrelevant from the storytelling point. Think about it with Maria. How much do we hear about what she actually did? I said she picked up the phone, made a couple of calls, went online, and that was about it. I didn't say anything else in terms of how she did it. It was all about the client. So the setup is what the client's feeling before they came along. The moment the client rings you up and your first contact with them, what situation in? What's their problem? What's the issues? And you can almost, from a storytelling point, I'm not saying, to be very clear here, we need to be factual with our stories, definitely. I'm not saying, tell untruths, but we want to actually sort of take that, what's going wrong, to its sort of, logical conclusion, catastrophize it out. What if that goes bad? Well, that's going to mean that happens. You've got to dramatize it in that sense. As I say, keeping it truthful, clearly. And then you swoop in and save the day. You're the superhero. In you come, off you go, you've done it. What does the client feel afterwards? Now, again, context, we don't necessarily need to hear a lot about it. What was the afters in the Maria story? Well, it was the postcard through the door. We don't know what we'd have done without you. It's the importance of how they're feeling as a client. That's how you get emotion in. And if you can combine those, get those structured right, you could easily get the emotion there. Basically, take it off you, put it on your client. All right. Are we happy with that? Because we've come to the end of the third part. Effectively engage with stories. That's what the third part of the step process is. Engage with stories. Let's move on to the final one then, and we talk about patience. Now, it's a bit annoying, that one. Talk about patience, basically means it's not going to happen immediately, and it's not. That's the way it works. Quick comparison. Take a lion in Africa. I'm sure David Attenborough would have a problem with me in terms of how the biology of this works, but lion wakes up in the morning, thinks, oh, I'm hungry. So's the family. Best go and find some food. Best go on a little hunt. Find some poor stag or antelope. There's a hunt scene, a chase scene, a kill scene, then there's food for all the family. What happens the next day? Got to go through the same process again, subsistence style of living. And some people look at networking the same way. They see a group of people and think, yeah, I can do business here. Yeah, a couple of bits of business. Then they've got to go and hunt off to the next group. They've got to go and find, they're consistently having to do it, hard selling their way through and burning through lots of people. A different approach is to do it like my daughter does it. So this is my daughter, Maggie May. This was a couple of years ago when she was 6. That is her after she has planted some carrots in the garden. And after she planted, big thing, she was so excited about planting these carrots. She got very excited about it. But shortly after that photo was taken, her face fell. What's going on? She planted the carrots. She wanted to harvest the carrots right then and there. Now, we all know that that's not how it works. It takes time for the plants to grow. You've got to tend the plants. You've got to make sure they get sunlight, water, and make sure insects don't get in them. But over time, if you do that process consistently, you'll get some carrots. She wanted the instant return. A lot of people, the best way to look at networking is to take the farming approach. If you plant a seed of a relationship, you'll get the return back. As long as you consistently make the keep tending that relationship. So it desperately requires some patience. And then I guess what do I do in the meantime? That's the question you may well be asking. And a lot of this comes down to when you have to follow up with people. You meet someone for the first time, or you meet them for the 99th time. You've met them loads of times. It's what you do after that meeting that counts. And I'm going to set you a follow-up challenge. If you want referrals, let's say you've met someone, or you've got a good contact, you can refer each other, you can make a difference for each other. Here's your follow-up challenge. When you follow up with them, don't ask for referrals. Now that might seem strange, because this is someone this is someone, or maybe someone you're getting to know. But in the case of someone where there's already a relationship there, you know them already. Well, why can't you ask them for referrals? Whatever you do, don't ask for referrals. Now, hopefully they will come up with referrals. Let's be clear about that. But here's what we can do instead. Instead of asking referrals, look to build a relationship. Get to know stuff about them. Get to find that common ground. Get to find out who they want to want to get to know in business, who they want to speak to. Equally, you can give them some value. You all operate businesses, you'll know your stuff. Give them some value, help them out in some way. You know, a good example recently, I'm doing a lot of networking with different people at the moment. There's one person, legal is a good area for me, just generally. And I was just chatting with someone I've got to know recently in legal, and I don't have much to help her in terms of contacts within the legal industry because I'm new to that industry. But I do know a lot of stuff about networking, so I just gave her some value, and she's lapping up the content, and she's therefore maybe wants to help me. And the best way to do it, absolute best way to get referrals back from people, is to give them a referral. I mean, that's the ultimate way of building a relationship. You're giving them value as well. You're building, it's doing all that in one. If you give someone a referral, I defy them. Okay, you get some people who are not the people perhaps you want to associate with, maybe, I don't know, who will just ignore that and just think thanks and off they go. But 99.999% of people will go, wow, that's good of you. How can I help you? You know, it's that feeling. You go around to someone's house, they invite you to dinner, and you walk away with your other half, and you think, oh, we really must invite them over to our house soon, mustn't we? You know, it's as Dave said, the law of reciprocity. I have to say reciprocity. You can spell it. I can just about say it. So we'll go with that. Yeah, it is a powerful thing. There's no question. So being patient is a fundamental part of the step process to getting referrals. It doesn't happen overnight. It's no quick fix for an ailing business. It takes time to make it happen. I'm just about nearly finished. I'm conscious of time. I didn't actually set a starter on my website. I know I must be just about ready to finish. Just a couple of quick things. If you'd like to find out how good a networker you are, I've got a little quiz. It's free, takes 3 to 4 minutes, and whatever happens, you'll get a personalized report of what you know, a couple of quick and easy wins for you if you'd like to you know, to show you how you can improve your networking. Follow the QR code there. It's self-explanatory. You'll see how it works. Up to you if you'd like to do that. And let me just finish with another quick story, because as you've seen, I love a story. If you're thinking destination cities in America, where do you like to go? LA, New York, Miami, Vegas, maybe they're the ones that would come out. Ones that don't really come out is Cincinnati. Quick story. This is James. He was born in England in 1803. His first entrepreneurial adventure was a complete disaster. He set up a candle shop in London in the 1815 or so, and it burnt down on his first day of trading. He thought, screw this, I'm off to America. He was going to go to the West Coast, to LA, but tragically, as traveling through Cincinnati, he was with his wife, Martha. She fell ill and she passed away, healthcare not being great at the time. Distraught, obviously, he thought, I'm just going to stay here. This is William. He was born in Ireland in 1803. He also emigrated to America. Different reason, his whole family went, but similar circumstances befell him. When he was traveling through Cincinnati, they were on their way to Chicago. Sorry, he fell ill, and healthcare being what it was, took some time to get better. The family just said, look, let's just stay here. Both of them set up their businesses in Cincinnati, both of them in similar fields. Candles. James was in pharmaceuticals. Now, it turns out that both of them were a bit like me. They were unnatural networkers. They didn't talk to each other. But the reason that's really important is because they actually married into the same family. When James remarried, he married Olivia Norris. James married Elizabeth Ann Norris. They were brothers-in-law, in fact. And it was their respective father-in-law who said, look, why don't the two of you talk? You're a business. You should really get together. And so they did. I didn't tell you their full names. William Proctor and James Gamble formed what we now know as the global behemoth that is Procter & Gamble, from a referral. Okay, it was from their father-in-law. Doesn't matter who it's from in the end. That's just the way networking works. They formed that because of a referral. Referrals are such a powerful way of doing business. If you can find a proactive way to bring them into your business, you're going to succeed. I'll leave it there. Thank you very much for having me along.
Thank you very much, Charlie. Has anyone got any questions?
Tom, is that your hand up there?
It is.
Go for it, yeah.
Can I ask you a tricky question, Charlie?
I love a tricky, well, sometimes I like a tricky question. Depends how tricky it is. Go for it, yeah.
How do people avoid the very real trap of affinity bias?
Affinity bias, what do you can you give us a bit more context? You mean where they're...
So where basically when you talked about the stuff part,
yep,
and you said, oh, it's all about social stuff, all about the things you've got in common. I've personally suffered in the past from people referring people to me. Oh, this guy's a great guy, loved him, got on amazing with him, got so much in common, love all the same things. Doesn't mean people are any good.
That is true.
That's affinity bias, when you kind of fall in love with someone because you just like them, but they're not any good.
Yeah, no, I think there's always got to be, look, if you're going to spend time networking, trying to find referrals, trying to, you're looking to grow your business, there's got to be an ROI. If there isn't a return on investment, it's a waste of time. No one goes networking to make friends. I'd say that. None of you go networking. None of you here to make friends. That's not the primary reason. You're here to promote your business, to grow your business. But over time, when you do networking right and you build those relationships right, the fact is you do make friends. So yeah, you've got to be conscious that you're keeping focused on return on investment. If someone's not going to be a good fit for the business, might be the best person in the world, might, lots of shared, you've got to be realistic on that and just say, no, I need to.
Can I just follow up? Are there any specific questions that you would, if you're chatting to someone and networking, and you're kind of thinking they seem like a cool person, I'm getting a good vibe off them, now how do I steer them into kind of finding out if they're good at the thing?
Rewinding slightly, I'd still go based on who they are, what they are, I mean, there's the randomized nature of networking. I get that. Like we said, we don't know who anyone knows, but I still going to look at their LinkedIn profile and think, are they the sort of person, have they got the kind of connections that I'm interested in? Are they in the sorts of industries I'm interested in? So I'm still using that as a bit of a prerequisite before I'm investing lots of time in building that relationship. But let's say they're in front of you, you kind of check them out a bit, you think they might be good. Then I'd start asking one or two of these more, well, what are you into type questions, and try and find that common ground, because they're the sorts of questions that keep the conversation going. Because inevitably the stilted, slightly awkward small talk questions are going to dry up after time. So that's where I want to get into the conversation where we're wanting to chat rather than doing it because we kind of have to. If that makes sense.
Awesome, thank you.
Neil.
Yeah, thank you, Charlie. Great talk. Referrals always really important. Mine, not so much a question as a little bit of a story itself, on the value of actually, telling people a little bit more about yourself. I've got two stories. I used to be quite a successful racing cyclist, and quite often that, sharing those kind of stories has been quite successful. I have a new client. I did a friend's website for a bike shop down the end of the road, and I've got a new client who also lives down the end of the road in Windsor in cybersecurity, and he kind of drew that affinity because he'd seen the website and etc., but he also bonded because I was a cyclist and so was he. And then also I had a successful experience when I worked at UBS. One of the senior guys there spotted or knew that I was a cyclist. He was doing a TAPTA tour, one of these events. He was kind of like having a midlife crisis and getting into that. He bonded with me over cycling, and the fact he actually escalated me up through the company and got me into rooms that conversation wouldn't have happened if we hadn't got that bond about cycling. And I think that's really important, that people know a little bit more about you to build that relationship.
I agree. Totally with you. I think it's so important. And sometimes you might have the challenge. Look, you ask that question, "What are you into?" and the person you don't have shared interests. That will happen. I was quick one. I was at an event recently and said, "What are you into?" And this lady said to me, "I'm into crochet." And I literally know nothing about crochet. I don't think I'm ever going to know anything about crochet, to be quite honest. But seeing the way her passion for it came through in the conversation, it still drove a relationship between us. I was looking at her phone, and she was showing me all these quilt covers. I've never looked at quilt covers before in my life, but it was still fascinating because it showed what drives her and made her. So yeah, it doesn't always have to be a common bit of ground.
This is actually a little workshop. It was very, very quickly. It's a little workshop trick I had on that. When I do kind of workshops, trying to get people to bond and get them out their business thing, getting people to throw this around the room and say, tell the people in the room one thing they're not going to know about you. Yeah. Which is really great. Did find out in Copenhagen once that somebody got signed for Chelsea by accident because they have the same name of somebody they actually wanted to sign for Chelsea, and he spent an entire week at the academy in London before they realised he wasn't the person that they actually wanted.
I won't make comments about Chelsea Football Club being a bit of, no, I won't go there. No, let's not do that.
Anyway, thank you.
Cheers, Neil. Yeah. Hey, Dave.
Hey Charlie, great to hear you talk. As someone who kind of used to run events and then kind of talks on referrals in a broader sense, it's very nice to sit back and hear someone else do it, actually. It's really nice. I've got a tricky question for you as well. So someone's asking for how do you cope with it when people ask you for referrals, but you don't want to refer them?
There's only three reasons, I think, why you wouldn't want to refer someone. One, you don't have a good enough relationship. Two, you don't rate them. Or three, they haven't given you information required. Now, your question is squarely aimed at the first one. I'd be straight with them. I think if you string people along and say, yeah, I could probably help with you there, kind of make generalizations about it, then that's not going to help anyone in the long term. And you're going to waste your time doing that, and they'll probably keep chasing you on it. So don't do it. I'll say, look, I don't know you well enough to do it. Can we sit down and get to know each other properly? And if they're truly committed to that, then yeah, they'll engage in that process. And I may be able to after getting to know them a bit better, or I may not. But I think it's always better to be straight with them and be honest.
So what about when you know them but don't rate them? Because that's probably where I was more steered. Right. And that's the trickier part, right? So like, you know them, you might like them, but what if you just don't feel?
If you can't feel you can, look, a referral should be an enhancement of everyone's credibility, particularly the person in the middle. The person receiving the business, delighted because they're getting some business. The person receiving the service, delighted because they're getting a need fulfilled. The person in the middle, it should be the ultimate credibility enhancer. And if you can't do it, then you can't do it. And I'm always going to advocate being straight with people and just saying, look, I'm not in a position to be able to refer you. I'm sorry. I had someone come recently with me, and it's slightly different because it's not a referral. They were effectively, I could become a client of theirs, and I don't rate them enough to do it. And I've just said, look, I need to make a decision as to whether you're the right person for me to do this with. I hope that makes sense. And she replied, yeah, that makes sense. So I think being straight with them is the best policy.